Welcome everyone to yet another SDN Community Voices, our weekly touch point between you, the followers, members, and the community behind the Service Design Network, and all the amazing voices that we have throughout the service design community. My name is Felipe, and I'm excited to again be your ambassador and host. And today I'm very excited to have Anna Kholina on with us today. She was a SDGC 24 speaker in Helsinki, and also its head of Futurice. But I'll let her to introduce herself better than I can. And before we dive in, just a quick reminder, always to drop your questions in the chat. We'll address them in our Q&A segment by the end of our episode. But now let's just bring Anna to the stage and ask her to introduce herself. Hey, welcome.
Hey, Felipe. Nice to see you, and thanks a lot for having me in this weekly series. Very happy to be here.
Thank you.
Yep. My name is Anna. So as you correctly said, I was a speaker at the SDG 24, talking about design against capitalism. And in my work life, I work as a design director at Futurice, based in Helsinki. And also I recently finished my doctoral thesis at Aalto University. So I have a bit of a double identity. So on one hand, I really like my design director job and all the client work associated with that. But at the same time, I also have this passion for academic research. And especially since my topic is slightly different from my day-to-day work, I also have this like double identity. On one hand, service design and strategy, but on the other hand, also the urban design and planning are my two passions.
So your topic right now on the PhD is more on urban design and planning then?
Yes, so I graduated already last year, just 6 days before the conference, the SDG. Yes, so the topic was more about how do we go around our endless suburban periphery in the cities. You know that a lot of urban growth happens now in the periphery, and my topic was essentially about how do we design this periphery in a way to create polycentric regions? Is it easy? Is it in the power of architects and planners to create spaces where people come where they want to stay? Or is it a completely social, uncontrollable process where that people, they like certain places, don't like other places, and it's not in our power to design that? So I was looking into that topic.
Cool. How do you think this exploration on the PhD kind of influenced then your work back with clients at Futurice, or how do you think it kind of intersected there?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. Well, at first, I think it didn't really intersect because in my work at Futurice lately, in the last few years, I've been working with like large corporations, and that's also what I'm quite mesmerized by. How do you do business in this very complex corporate environment? So there was not much overlap in the beginning, but then towards the end, I discovered this more like a connection that was this lens of seeing how capitalism reproduces itself in our everyday life and our work and so on. And I think that helped me to understand a bit that where is the bridge between these two fields and two areas of my life. But in the beginning, yeah, there was not much overlap. It was just, yeah, I'm very interested in corporations and I'm very interested in cities. So why don't I just do both? And then almost burnt out. But here we are.
Well, you did graduate already, so congratulations to that. So
Thanks.
you survived it. And do you think then that influenced maybe a little bit the talk you had in SDGC 24?
Yes, very much. I remember when there was a call for speakers last year, I was in the final steps of my PhD and I was writing this really heavy theoretical chapter about neo-Marxism and this kind of stuff. And then I was reading all these books and I was like, damn, this should be super interesting for designers. Why don't we talk more about it? It is so relevant to our work. So I had this idea that, okay, I will take this really heavy academic literature and I'll try to bring it to the conference in a format that designers can relate to. And I think that's where I got this wild idea. So I applied and somehow the talk ended up being in the SDG and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I think we can always learn so much from this kind of tangential disciplines, right? Really becoming kind of the sponges and understanding how other disciplines can influence our work or also how we influence their work. Is there other disciplines throughout your career that you think kind of influenced you or impacted you or also just inspired you in general as a designer?
Yeah, of course. And I think like, I guess for many of us who work or originally started to work in service design, it's quite natural to expand because some service designers came to this topic from UX or from graphic design, and others came from business domain and other domains. So I think it's very natural to slowly expand to other, like for example, in my case, I've been shifting a bit from service design towards strategy and business in the last few years, and also always keeping an eye on sustainability and trying to integrate that as much as I can. So of course I'm also inspired by other disciplines, like, but I do get a lot of inspiration really from reflecting on the day-to-day, the type of day-to-day work that I do, and try to kind of get the feeling and the understanding of the complexities of the organizations that I'm interacting with in my job. So I think that topic is always something I'm fascinated by, that you don't need to work in a particular systems thinking domain to do systems thinking, because everywhere we work there are these complex systems that we are surrounded by. And I think that's something I've been really trying to go into, like seeing everything as a living system and try to apply the same methods that we use in more complex scenarios in the day-to-day work.
Amazing. Do you have like a short example of something like that that happened throughout your work?
Well, I guess it's a universal also example that many people experience in these complex setups when you work in a big corporate organization that try to make sense of the big complex matrix corporate organization when you are in one silo and there are many, many other silos. And there is a lot of these hidden causes and effects that influence the whole setup. So just trying to understand like how even one organization works inside themselves, even without going to more complex systems. I think this has been like a pattern that I've had in my work, that all over again, that if I come to or join an organization, I spend not even a year, usually even more than a year, just trying to understand, trying to map all these dependencies, how these complex structures influence one another. For example, what could be the shared incentives or conflicting incentives that in turn influence the way that we get or don't get support for our design initiatives or for customer-centric initiatives or for sustainability initiatives. I think that has been very interesting. And lately, if you want like even a more concrete example, what I've been looking at is how does the sustainability function move within these corporations? So, like before, it was driven by a small group of people, and then there starts to be more traction and more legislation coming from European Union in this context, in European context. And now I've been seeing increasingly sustainability function moving towards finance, towards legal, towards marketing, so towards more compliance-based thinking. And I think that has been like one very interesting systemic shift that I've been trying to understand and reflect on, that how this legislative push, which is on one hand super cool, like right with the CSRD, we'll get a way to compare sustainability actions and progress between different companies. Great. But at the same time, because it's so close to other reporting, financial reporting, for example, then the finance or legal or marketing, then they start to take over these activities, and how that influences like day-to-day business operations. Even though, like, look, I mean, service design maybe is not in the middle of this whole mess, but being embedded in this organization gives you a chance to reflect, like how could this be done differently, what are the leverage points, and so on. So apply these very traditional systems thinking practices to understand even this kind of mundane phenomena.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting perspective because, as you're saying, corporations themselves, they are complex in nature, but also sustainability itself is even more complex when you're thinking about non-human systems and all of that and how they all interact, right? So how do you kind of make sense of all of that mess?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't really make sense of it, and I don't think that anyone can have like one clear, like perfect toolkit, perfect picture, perfect canvas, to rule them all. Although I had a feeling, I don't know how about you, but I had this feeling that at some point there's been like influx of canvases, like to rule them all, trying to. Did you have this experience, like
Yeah.
seeing more and more toolkits appearing? To be honest, I just had a lunch with one of my close colleagues, and we've been talking about exactly this, that when you are in this setup, and that's also what really fascinates me in being able to work with very complex organizations, you have to make errors. You have to be wrong. Like I have this very interesting experience of being in an organization for like 3 years and being wrong for 2 out of 3 years consecutively, which of course created a lot of questions about my self like image and what am I doing here, about my life choices and such. But the only way for me to make sense out of complexity is having a safe space to be wrong. And this is maybe the first thing I try to do when I come into a new context, is that trying to understand in that company and that business environment, what is the tolerance for being wrong? Because, like if your career is at stake for one error, you will not take risks. You will not allow you and your team to learn new things. So that's going to be very, very tricky. So I'm wondering also if anyone is in the audience who's listening to us, I'm wondering what's your experience also of this type of activity when you know it's too complex. Like I cannot even say that I know enough about sustainability to be like confidently doing it, but still, like how do you feel that you have the space in your setups to be wrong and still to be kind of continuing and learn from it? Does the culture support you in that? Do the people support you in that? I think that that's the way to make sense, because like sense making to me is also a continuous process of talking, reflecting, sensing, understanding, drawing these big pictures, try to make them more concrete and so on, supplementing them with data. I think that that's my way of making sense, being wrong consecutively in a safe environment.
Yeah, and I think that that's very powerful also, because it's not only the safe space to be wrong, but also the humbleness of yourself to admit that you're wrong, right? And learning, reflecting from that. Because if you, as you're saying, if you don't reflect on what you're doing, then you're not going to learn. So it's this kind of process of making sure that you understand where you can learn from the mistakes and not just think about them as just mistakes, right?
Exactly. I think you're raising a very good point here, like about being humble, because I often hear this discourse recently that what do we bring to the table as designers? We should bring something to the table, ROI of design, ROI of CX, and so on. And there's like big, big discussions about this. But I think what you're saying is really, really nailing it, in the sense that as designers, we have this increased capacity to be humble, because we always, more we have more capacity to learn, or we are more trained to learn from the context. The context is messy. It's really not what you expect it to be. So it always humbles you down. Like you have your ideas about your users or customers or the system, and then you go out there and it's completely wrong. And you come back like, whoa, I've learned so much. So we kind of have this habit of being humble about ourselves, because we just know that things will turn out differently. I know that in the business domain, a lot of stakeholders I work with, a lot of them are like this, and I'm really happy and I'm privileged to work with people who are humble enough to admit that they are wrong, or to learn with that. But there is like this common conception in the business world that being wrong is bad.
Yeah.
And so people there are usually more stiff and less eager to learn and adapt. So I think one of the things that designers definitely bring to the table and to the team is kind of being wrong safely and bringing this humbleness to the environment, which generally doesn't permit errors that much. And
Yeah.
that's not something you can obviously monetize in like as an ROI, but in general, long term, that creates this resilience and adaptability in organization that I'm sure there's a lot of papers written about, but I just don't know how to otherwise characterize.
Yeah, I think there's always this kind of communication step, right, in between disciplines. So business people or corporate, more focused people might think more in numbers, ROI, as you're saying, but kind of creating this bridge of understanding what being wrong, being humble, making mistakes can also bring, without the negative connotations that maybe they might think about making mistakes.
Exactly. And it requires a lot of ways to kind of being able to do some introspection. And also, this raises also clearly, as I see it in today's corporate world, as a very important capability to develop within the organizations, the ability to be introspective about this kind of things when they happen, that with the being wrong comes certain discomfort. How do you name this emotion? How do you recognize it? How do you process it instead of making someone else feel guilty for that failure and so on. So I guess to me, the smartest organizations are those who can not only learn from their failures, but also have like they hold space for these difficult emotions. And it sounds like really esoteric, I think, as I'm listening to it, but it's like what I'm trying to say. But I really believe that it's something that will define the organizations of tomorrow, like not only how they integrate AI into the pipelines. Of course, that's super important, I guess, maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure. But also how much ability to reflect on their emotions in these difficult, conflicting situations they have, and how much sensibility they have also to accommodate people with different opinions, and give them space also to feel comfortable. Because, nothing happens in isolation. And I guess a lot of us are also working with other experts together day after day. And that also brings a lot of energy.
Yeah, I think the joke about AI is a little bit pertinent also because a lot of times there's this trend. Right now it's AI, before it was metaverse, before it was IoT. I don't know. There's always like a trend and people saying this is the next thing, right? So everybody has to do this. And it feels that sometimes those people are not so humble to think maybe that's not the next thing, right? It might be now, but we cannot really know what's going to innovate in the business in the future because we're not there. So how do you navigate a little bit those people that are very, let's say, strong-minded of saying this is the next thing?
Hey, this is like a really interesting question. And to be honest, I often also find myself thinking that how to like hold on to your authentic kind of way of working with all this FOMO, new tools popping up every day, everybody saying like, like, yeah, this like what you see on LinkedIn, that design is dead, UX is dead, and everything is dead once in a while, like every couple of days, a new thing is dead. And yeah, it is like it puts like a lot of pressure trying to kind of keep up with all this hype, trying to learn, to navigate, to understand the limitations, think about, is that really a safe system to pour your data into? I think I've like what I've read at least recently, and this really gave me a lot of inspiration on that topic. There was this really good article by Pavel Samsonov. He has a Substack called Design Picnic, I think it's called. And he wrote an article about, can designers avoid meetings? And the point was that now that we usually in big organizations there's pretty many silos, and AI has this promise of, removing all these unnecessary meetings by summarizing everything from everyone and just doing this work of alignment for us. And if you think about it, but the meetings are the work, kind of creating alignment. It's not about that we have a short summary. It does, like, I think he has this like really, really cool sentence there that I really love, that the purpose of user research is not a short summary, is to immerse your stakeholders, especially the business and the tech, in the users and the participants world. And I think it's really beautiful, and it gives this idea that it's not about AI making things more efficient or creating things that are quicker and more like agile, but rather you still need those meetings to create internal alignment with people that you work with. And these meetings will not go anywhere until the organization has this philosophical alignment around why do we do things and how do we do things. So in that sense, it helps me see past the hype. That yes, AI has, as any good tool, it has a way to make something more streamlined, as long as you have good data, by the way, not without it. But
Yeah.
still, what AI doesn't help to do is avoid the necessity of philosophical alignment between the different parties about what is our strategy, why do we do this, what is our priority, what is our bet, how do we know that we succeeded, how do we measure that. This is not something AI really can produce for people. So we will still need to do this work. And for that, we still need to be present with any kind of job we have. So that really helps me to kind of ground and see it in a bit of a perspective. As a new tool, fancy tool, yes, but still a tool that does not replace the human capacity for creating this alignment, and most importantly, creating intrinsic motivation between the different people inside different units to do the same thing we're about to do.
Yeah, I mean, it
How,
reminds me
like,
a little bit of the idea of the importance is the journey, not the final destination, right? Of
Yeah, exactly.
understanding what you're learning from that.
How do you feel? Because I'm curious also from your perspective. Now you get bombarded probably with a lot of like AI promises. Is it easy to navigate this hype and stay calm, or does it bother you in some way?
I think it's interesting to see the way these trends go, because it feels that everybody just jumps in without really knowing why. A little bit what you're saying, right? You're saying how you're doing, why you're doing. And I think the why is something that's a lot of times often you're like, oh, I just know what I want to do. It's bring AI. But the why is very, very important. As you said, for example, data sets for AI is very important. And we had loads of problems in the past decade with big corporations like Apple and Google, and having problems, or Microsoft, that they put something with a very, very biased data set, and that backfired because you didn't really think why or what was really the purpose of what you're doing there. You just put it out, right? And I think it's okay on what you're saying, it's a mistake, but also learning from that mistake is important. And I think a lot of times people are not, they're just like pushing and pushing and pushing, but not reflecting, just seeing what sticks. And that's an interesting way. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it's just interesting to see what this kind of big wave of things being tried. And yeah.
Got it. Yes, I can. I really feel you in that. And of course, it's really hard to trust the system sometimes. And I think that's something maybe a service design has really a lot of potential in that sense. That how do you also create trust between the AI, because it is going to stay, it is going to be there for the future. But how do you create enough trust that it kind of has some sort of pipeline to validate whatever things you're getting out, that you're not just getting some random statistical nonsense into your work?
Yeah. But trailing a little bit back, right? We're also talking about their service strategic system design, right? You're kind of navigating all of these different terminologies or fields per se. How do you think they differentiate, or how they intersect? How do you feel they work for you on your day-to-day life?
Maybe I can comment about service and strategy, because this is the two domains that I'm, at least like in my work life, I am currently moving like really like a lot between those two, like this like zigzag. And
Mm,
I think there are a couple of like really big differences. That usually service design takes the outside in perspective. Let's look at our customers, let's look at our life cycle and their life cycle. Strategy usually has the inside out perspective, like our company, our product, our next step, our field where we play, and so on. And I think in that sense, they're really, really compatible. You need to have both perspectives, because the strategy is usually very kind of condensed way to say what we are going to do next and why. And
mm,
the service design is a really good way to understand the context of it, and where do those insights emerge from at the same time. So I think those two fields are very kind of, how do you say, they complement each other well. But at the same time, there are these kind of key differences that with service design, we tend to go very deep, very fast. We
mm,
can pinpoint the exact bottleneck in our service blueprint somewhere down the line that creates some kind of waste or create some kind of delay that we then can connect to the experience. But strategy cannot go that deep. It should be very easy, so that everyone, like you meet someone in the corridor, hey, what's our strategy? They should be able to recall it. It shouldn't be difficult. And that's kind of the beauty of it, that how do you condense your story, your whole narrative, your whole journey to something that you should be able to spell out within 20 seconds in the elevator. And
mm,
also, like, good strategies are great in helping us say no to things.
mm.
In like with the when you put your service design hat on, everything becomes an opportunity. We can fix this and this and this and this, but strategy helps us to say no to things. So which features we are not adding and why, which way we are not going and why. And I think being able to switch this kind of brain, it is actually quite a task, from diverging from seeing the picture holistically to being very concise, very strategic, like very kind of business oriented. I think that is quite fascinating. But these things are so well complementing each other that I think that a lot of service designers kind of are natural strategists because of that.
Amazing. Well, with that reflection, I also like to open for the audience. If you have any questions now for Anna, drop them in the chat and we're going to answer them live. And while we're waiting just for a second to get some questions, because there's a little bit of a delay, I just wanted to mention that we have the tickets for SDGC 25 live that is going to be in Dallas in the US. So Anna was a speaker from last year Service Design Global Conference, and we have even more amazing Service Design Global Conference speakers for this year. So please check it out if you're interested in hearing a lot more of what Anna has been saying, or other people are also working in the service design industry. But I believe we also already have a question. So from Adekunle, sorry, I'm terrible with names. But I was thinking strategy design and service design together looks the same. Please, can you explain more how they differ?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's thanks for the question. I think they do differ because, well, first, like as I said, that strategy usually is kind of like a bit of an inside-out exercise. So we look at the company, at the capabilities that they have, of course, at their positioning, at their benchmarks, and all the other inputs as well. But it usually comes from kind of, like you yourself from that perspective, like your products, your services, what you offer, where you want to be, in which markets you want to compete. So it's a very much inside out exercise. Service design, it's outside in. So you look at more the overall picture and how your users and customers experience your services and products. And in that they vary, and also they vary in the level of conciseness. That in service design, we tend to really embrace a lot of details, a lot of, like we talk about the front stage and the backstage, and in the backstage, we have all the systems and technologies and departments collaborating, navigating this complexity, and we go into all these details. With strategy, you don't do that. You need like a very, very concise way to summarize what are we doing and why, how are we going to win in this particular market situation. So these two levels of difference that I see, that one is inside out, the other is outside in, and one being very concise, very focused, like so easy to spell out that everyone can remember it, and the other is being very detailed, very deep, very rich in all kinds of information. So these two things I can name.
Amazing. We also have a question from Alessandra. How do you conciliate being wrong part of the work with working with stakeholders that are so sure they are right? They just want to get confirmation on their knowledge.
Thank you, and thanks a lot, Alessandra. And Alessandra is this amazing person who also gave talks at the last conference about design and systems thinking. So highly recommend that one. Yes, a really good question. I mean, it's really difficult because you need to kind of have your tribe, have people who share the same values as you, because yeah, that's like really difficult, because especially in more hierarchical organizations, admitting that they are wrong is really, really difficult. So usually how I go around it is that I try to, take the hit myself, that I bring something that they don't want to talk about, but then I say like, I might be wrong. It may be my fault. And they say, yeah, you're wrong, you're wrong. And I'm like, okay, I'm wrong. So you keep kind of being wrong yourself to like not put them in the tough spot right away, but slowly to increase their tolerance for these difficult conversations. Because yes, I also learned the hard way that it's not possible to get people from like A to B, from sure that they are right to admitting that they are wrong in one day. So it's like a journey you need to take them on, and also trying to understand their motivations. What keeps them so constrained? Is it the lack of motivation, or is it they have some sort of incentive to be right? Like, what is it really, the corporate culture? But usually I try to like just assemble some key people around myself who are comfortable being wrong, and then make it a team effort, that I don't have to do it myself only, but try to find key people in that company who like to be also wrong with me safely. And then through them, usually this energy starts to spread. But this is in no way easy, and for sure feels like sometimes like an uphill battle in many
Yeah,
cases.
definitely. I think it's always hard to have this kind of, things that are not really connecting, and it's always a conversation that's hard to have, I would say.
Of course, and they need to kind of, they need to see maybe sometimes the power of learning when, yes, they still want this confirmation to their knowledge, but then you've showed them once, you've learned that you did something wrong, you've learned something, corrected, things have improved. You do it again, you've learned something, you were wrong, you corrected, things have improved. So over time, but that always requires time, and it's especially hard to do, for example, in consultancy context, where you have only a short engagement with the client, almost mission impossible. But then again, you're in a good situation because they pay you money to challenge them. So then you can also bring this aspect. But I found it easiest when you have like a longer term contact with your organization or your customer in the consultancy. Then it's really possible to like slowly with time get them a bit more comfortable with this uncertainty.
Amazing. Well, with that, we're coming to the end of our time together. So I thank you very much, Anna, for your time and all your insights.
Thank you, Felipe, and thanks for inviting. And thanks a lot to everybody who was listening or will listen to the recording, and reach out and let's talk about these topics further.
Amazing. Thank you very much. And to everybody that joined us online, thank you for engaging, sending questions, and for being interested in this series. I would just like to remind everyone that if you're not a member, go here on the link tree and have a look, because just later today, we're going to have the SDN Global Cafe that's hosted by our amazing two presidents of the SDN. They're having a conversation with Greg from the Dallas chapter. So if you're a little bit interested about SDGC and SDGC 25 that's happening in Dallas this year, please have a look. I think it's just in 1 hour from now, and they're doing a much more deep dive than we can do in this short 30 minutes. So thank you very much for joining, and see you again next Thursday. So bye.